Hi, I'm Dr. Marc Mednick. I'm a licensed psychologist and expert on family disputes. I've been doing this work for over 30 years, helping parents split up, doing what's best for their kids, working with entire families, trying to help them get through this very difficult time. A couple of things stick out. One is how lonely this can feel. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, young or old, whether this relationship is long-term or short-term, how you got together. The point is, right now, you may feel really up against it. Most people feel like they're making this transition completely and utterly alone. Even if that's not true, that's very often how it feels. Even if you have a support system around you, you can feel like you're the only one going through this. You don't know where to turn. You don't know what to ask. You don't know what the answers are that you're looking for. When you remove someone who's been your other half of your life, it leaves this chasm, especially if you're both responsible for kids that you're creating together. Everybody's in the middle of this messy time. You're not sure what to do with your kids. You're not sure how they're going to react. You're not sure how to handle this thing called a divorce. So that's why I decided to create this podcast. We're calling it Make Sense of the Mess. Each episode, we're going to take on a different question, some big conundrum that you face as a co-parent, some very important issues that you must handle in the early stages of a divorce. And we're going to break down those questions with the hope that you'll walk away with some better handholds. Specifically 4 C's: clarity, courage, context, and community to work through this very messy time. So here is how it's going to work. In each episode, we're going to take on some new topic, something that is timely for you, something that is really urgent and necessary for you to attend to, that you need some answers with. How are we going to do that? We're going to invite some real-life people who are going through what you're going through. We're also going to invite some experts in the field to discuss kind of the best things to do, say, not do, not say. And together, we're going to really plumb the depths of these issues so that you get a much better handle on what to do and how to do it. So this is not something you're going to go through alone. You're going to have us to take with you along the way. Buckle up and join us. So glad you found this show. Together, let's make sense of the mess. So in the last episode, we talked about what to do when it hits you that divorce is now on the table. That's big. Now we're going to assume that it is happening, that the wheels are in motion. So now it's time to talk about the next big threshold to cross, how to build an effective social support network for you and your children for the duration of the divorce. At this point, you may be yawning a bit, saying Mednick is now sounding pretty clinical. And I don't mean to here. I want to drive home the point that this is really essential, that having effective social supports is critical to your personal success and your children's success. So who are these people that make up an effective social support network? Well, I would look at this as 4 different areas, 4 different pillars of an effective social support system. One is trusted family, friends, and or spiritual advisors. A second is therapists for you, your children, maybe even a co-parenting therapist. A third looks at the ecology of your children's life. So school psychologists, teachers, talking to them about the divorce in a way that makes sense so that the kids can get the support they need there. And the fourth is a focus on self-care and gratitude. Let's go through each of these. So let's start with the first, trusted family, friends, and spiritual advisors. Your family and friends are the ones that are most likely to be protective of you. That's true. They feel your pain. They want to hold your ex responsible. They may have or express some very active fantasies that are about revenge, about taking them for all they're worth, about taking all the money and the kids. They want them to pay for having hurt you. They tend to echo every awful feeling you have. They agree with you. You've been maligned. You've been betrayed. It's dreadful. If this is what your family and friends are doing for you, and that's all they're doing for you, I'm telling you they're doing you a terrible disservice. Support in a divorce is a difficult thing for family and friends. I get it. In addition to feeling your pain, they're feeling some pain themselves. They feel let down. They feel like their lives are changing. But this isn't about them. This is about you. What you need is someone to help keep you accountable, solution-focused, in charge of your emotions, not ruled by them. That means people willing to reel you in, keeping you reasonable and rational at a time when your negative emotions run high. That's not easy. They can't do that by themselves. Yes, that involves you. You have to be willing to do that for yourself. But they need to be sounding boards. These are the kind of people, when you talk to them and you are off the rails and screaming and shouting and in terrible pain, they help to calm you. They help you to get more perspective. They help you to step back, and they tell you the truths you need to hear that you may not wish to hear. They do the opposite of agreeing with your right to feel and express every negative fantasy and pain that you have. They are solution-focused, and it may sound kind of boring and tedious, and you may be angry with them for doing it, but it's kind of what you need right now. So how do you find these people? Well, you're not going to go out and make new friends. Yes, you can get into some chat group online, but I really don't recommend that as a first line of your own defense. What I recommend is that you approach the people you would trust the most, and you contract with them. You tell them that you need them to play this role for you. And then you really task them with whether or not they can do it for you. I mean, can you really tell me what I need to hear? I need you to do that for me. Will you agree with me right now? Will you swear that you're going to do this for me? Because that's what I need you to do. You know, sometimes you have a friend who's just supportive and they're a great listener. They just don't have that level of assertion. It's just not in them to tell you this kind of stuff. They're a great sounding board, but they can't hold you to account. That's fine. You still need them too. But who is it that you can contract with that will tell you what you need to hear when you need to hear it? Those are the people that you need as part of your social support network. These are the people that will help you walk back your anger, your resentment, and your hurt, and they won't let you dwell in your negative emotion. So let me be very clear. This is your divorce, but you need to give others the permission to speak to you in the way you need to be spoken to. You need to make it clear to them what you need, and you need to give them the permission to speak to you in this way. If you can do that, you'll be surprised about who may show up. So I've included spiritual advisors in this group of potential support people because clergy are both protective of you, but also protective of the institution of marriage. My point is simply that clergy are not without a bias, but do have a point of view worth considering, particularly if you consider yourself to be a faith-based person. Divorce is a deeply personal decision, and for many, it's one bound by the dictates of morality and religious belief. But in the final analysis, if you're a religious or faith-based person, you may consider this support and guidance fundamental to your decision-making process, to your support. For some, the decision to divorce results in feeling shamed or subjected to guilt-inducing commentary by their community. It may lead to feeling rejected, humiliated, condemned. To be sure, that doesn't apply to everybody, and I'm not suggesting that it does. Some will be supported by their religious community, buoyed by the support they feel. I'm simply saying that this is your divorce and your life, and you must be prepared for some of the consequences of this difficult decision, including how you will manage the shame and guilt you may feel or that may be foisted upon you by others. As a final thought about how to use clergy as part of your support network or other people in your community, I found it really common over the years for people to censor what they tell people in their religious community. So they kind of leave out or minimize the extent of the intimate partner violence or family violence that they've experienced. Or they minimize the extent of their partner's addictions or mental health disturbance out of a desire not to shame or humiliate their partner. But by not telling the whole story, they deprive themselves of the critical feedback that they need in order to make a better decision, in order to get the support they need. There's also this other thing, this opposite trend, which is a little troubling for a much smaller and more toxic group of parents who exaggerate or fabricate allegations of abuse by their partner, resulting in the religious community turning against them. That's the antithesis of social support. Now, you may be on the flip side of this. That's why I'm making mention of it right now. And you need to be very clear about who you can speak to honestly in your community. No guarantee everybody will listen in that community or any other, for that matter. But try to be as honest and direct and truthful as you can. Be authentic, and good things will follow. The second pillar here is finding a good therapist for yourself and the kids, and or finding a good co-parenting therapist that you and the other parent can talk to. So this is a major life change for you and your kids, and part of moving through this process is to have people that you can rely on to be objective and supportive, as we've talked about. Some of those people are professional. They've been through this. They've counseled people through numerous divorces. They're experienced at this. And psychotherapy is really the best way that I know for you to review this relationship, how you got here, what to do next, how to feel maintained through the process. It's good to talk to somebody. It's good for your kids to talk to somebody. It's the place to explore the depths of any pain associated with the relationship and now the divorce. Kind of your goal in therapy is to position yourself so that you can move on to the next relationship you will have. Think about that as the ultimate goal. This is not an ending place. You don't want to get stuck and mired in conflict forever. You want to work with somebody that can help you move through this passage, and for your kids to help them move this passage so that life gets better. The conflict reduces, the skies turn blue. That's what you want. Think of therapy as just necessary to your well-being. It's like eating and having good nourishment. I mean, this is nourishment for your psyche. A good therapist will tell you the things you don't want to hear. They won't just give you encouragement. They won't do all kinds of things like concluding that your ex must be a narcissist, because that can't be true all the time. It's what I hear all the time, by the way, in my sessions. My ex is a narcissist. Well, not everybody can be a narcissist. There aren't that many of them in the universe. I'm just saying. All right? So you want somebody who will be honest with you and hold you to account. Somebody who has a sense of humor also. This is kind of critical when you're working with a therapist going through this, because really every day can feel very challenging. You want somebody who can lighten the mood from time to time. Not make fun of you, but help you laugh at some aspects of the circumstance, which sometimes can feel really ridiculous as well as overwhelming. So here's a couple of things. Ask others for recommendations about who they've seen. Ask your friends, your lawyer, your doctor. I have to tell you, if you talk to a lawyer about therapists that know about this area, they know. There are people that they've dealt with in the past. They're actually pretty good. Pediatricians are a very good source for therapists. They keep in touch with people that they have worked with, and they're a good, reliable source. I think it's important to interview with at least 3 people, so you're comfortable with them. You have to be able to relate to them. You want to know what their experience base is working with divorce. You want to know how they're going to keep you in the loop about what they're really thinking about what you ought to be doing. Will they hold you accountable? Do they have specialized training or experience working with high conflict divorces, if that's where your relationship is trending? And you'll know that that's the case because you're dealing with somebody who's gaslighting you all the time, who's being critical, who is condescending. Those divorces don't go easily. So you want somebody who understands the ins and outs of that. A lot of therapists, quite frankly, don't. This is not one size fits all. This is your divorce. You need to feel comfortable that this person can work with you. So when you interview them, ask them, have you worked with high conflict situations? How do you work? Tell me about what modality you use. What is the emphasis that you have? You also want to know whether or not they've been trained in trauma-related issues. This is traumatic. It may not feel traumatic now. It's the length of the conflict that very often determines that. So take good care. Meet with people, see if you're comfortable. Comfort's a good thing. You don't want to have somebody that doesn't seem to hear you or relate to you in a style that creates that comfort for you. Now, when it comes to finding a therapist for your children, another person to ask in addition to the pediatrician is the school psychologist. Really critical. They definitely have a list of people that they refer to all the time. A critical point here is that the school psychologist is not a private therapist. Their job is to do assessment of the situation, and if it's a long-term kind of effect that may be troubling your child, they want to refer that out. So they have therapists they deal with all the time. But you do want the school psychologist, sometimes a guidance counselor, involved in this process. They can do some really neat things for you when it comes to managing your child's adaptation in school. And we'll talk about some of that in a minute or two. But go to them for referrals. They have a list. They know who's good, and they'll be honest with you about who might be a good fit for your child. In addition, for recommendations about a child therapist, for young children, I'd recommend play therapy for kids as young as 3 or 4. A play therapist, an art therapist, can do some really cool things with your kids. Kids express their feelings through art and through play all the time. You're not going to sit there and discuss what's happening in their family. They don't really have words to describe that. They don't have a language of emotion to describe that. But all kids know how to play. And you'll be surprised at what comes up in their play in terms of aggression and conflict, or in their drawings about how they feel about the power structure in a family or the conflicts in the home or who is aligned with whom. It's really illuminating, and it's a relief to your child to go. They're having fun, but they're also exploring how they feel, and they're adapting simultaneously. So don't rule that out, and make sure to ask the school psychologist about those options as well. Now let's talk about finding a co-parenting therapist. Yes, I mean going to see somebody with your soon-to-be ex. It's really critically important that the two of you are on the same page and can check in with each other on a regular basis about the kids. That does not mean you need to sit in the same office week after week and have these discussions. Sometimes that means once a month, once every other month. But you need to have somebody who can help you communicate effectively. Sometimes they use some online calendars and emailing situations so that they can be read in basically on your email traffic, so that this thing about he said, she said is reduced, and they can keep you focused on a problem like, do we need to see a specialist for our child, for a medical condition or something like that. They can help navigate issues pertaining to calendars, to schedules, to transitions, to exchanging days, to amending parts of the existing parenting plan that you ultimately agree to accommodate some change in a child's life, some little mini crisis that a child might be going through. Seeing a co-parenting therapist can help reduce conflict before it mushrooms out of control. Now, how do you find these people? Because not everybody does this. Get recommendations from your existing therapist. Please ask your lawyer about who they recommend. They know people who do this kind of work, because not everybody does it. Here's a critical part of this. Make sure the therapist has a background in child development. It's not just that they've taken courses, but they have good, solid clinical training and supervision in child development. I can't tell you how many times I come across therapists that really don't understand kids and their growth. So a credential is not having children of your own. It's helpful, but by itself, it's not a credential. You want people who have some background and supervision working with children. You also want, for purposes of your divorce, to have somebody that's very experienced. I would recommend a co-parenting therapist that has 10 or more years of clinical experience under their belt. All of these people can be read in, by the way, when it comes back to working with the school and working with guidance personnel. They're used to doing that. So a good co-parenting therapist, a good personal therapist, a good child therapist will have an emphasis on interacting with school officials, because they want to be read into what the kid's actual adjustment is. And it could be a nice flow here, where there's feedback to both parents about how the kids are acting and reacting and adjusting in school, as well as at home. But in order to have that flow, you really need to do your due diligence and interview as many people as you need in order to find somebody you're really comfortable with and can help you. Remember earlier in the episode where I talked about social support and people who tell you what you don't want to hear? Well, hello, this is one of those times. I know you're overburdened. I know you feel overworked and completely stressed out. But doing your due diligence on this and finding the right therapist is really critical to how your family is going to adapt and move through this messy time. Finally, I told you I was going to talk to you about yourself, about self-care and about gratitude. So here are just a couple of words here. Yes, you need to take care of yourself here. You need to be your own source of support. Go to therapy, go to acupuncture, watch your diet, go see the chiropractor, exercise, meditate, do all those kinds of things. It really is critical for you to marshal the best of you and take care of your own strength and energy through this. And when I'm talking about gratitude here, let me be clear about something. I'm talking about the part of your children, the gratitude that you have for your children that you created or adopted with your soon-to-be ex, that you have gratitude for how your child, even the one that is like your ex in some ways that you sometimes don't like, how they're there with you. And you have this wonderful opportunity to recraft them and align their interests with things that are good for them. Having gratitude is really important. You must have gratitude for your ex for the existence of your children. If you're going to co-parent effectively, if your children are not going to feel this tension. This is a really hard thing here. And when I say this to people, they look at me like I'm a little off. Gratitude for this person who has hurt me so much? Yes. You have these marvelous children, and they share a lot in common with this other person. You need to have gratitude for that too.
For children obviously are learning about the world around them, and one of the beliefs is centered on the understanding that their world starts out with their caretakers.
I'd like to welcome Dr. Marc Abrams, who is a very distinguished psychologist. I've known Dr. Abrams and his work for quite a bit, and he is an expert in several areas having to do with child development, child psychology, adolescent development, and adjustment. He's extremely knowledgeable about divorce, its effect on children and families, and has been an evaluator of situations in high conflict divorces, but provides services to everybody that goes through this kind of transition. We begin by talking about how children and teens experience divorce.
Sadly, when a divorce happens, that world gets shattered. They really don't have the ability until it happens to them to understand what that means to have this belief system suddenly no longer their reality. Children have what's commonly referred to as an egocentric worldview. They see the world as somehow they're always involved in some aspect of it. So one of the things they always struggle with is, what did I do wrong to cause my parents to no longer want to be together? And they may not be able to verbalize it, but they always struggle with it. When children become adolescents, there is, just like the naughty twos, there is this oppositional separation in which they want to be able to identify themselves as an independent being separate from the parents. And that frequently means, no, I'm not like you. So they want the stability of their parents to rebel against. So when the divorce happens, it really blows out of control their ability to manage their own emotions, their own thoughts, because the stability they think they have to rebel against something is no longer there, and the boundaries that help contain them are many times crumbling around them. And it's a very, very difficult period where their desire for some degree of power and control far exceeds their ability to manage the stress of the situation.
Yeah, I could see that. I've certainly experienced that, as have you, with kids over the course of our careers. So it kind of begs the next question for me, and I think for some of our listeners, which is, how do you tell the difference between a normal reaction to a divorce and one that requires professional intervention?
Each situation is different in its own unique and idiosyncratic way. And I think one of the easier ways that people can view it is to look at their children or teenagers. And if they are seeing a marked change of the normal behaviors, the emotional patterns, the thinking, and then they're hearing that in the environments that the children regularly and routinely interact in, whether it be sports, school, CCD, whatever it might be. If they're getting that feedback, it's letting them know that the children are not successfully navigating this process and may need more than they're getting to help them navigate their way through it.
What then do you tell them about the actual process? I mean, how do you work with a 5-year-old as opposed to a 15-year-old?
I have to go to where the mountain is and not drag the mountain to me. I really need to see what the child is struggling with and what the child is comfortable with. Many times with a 5-year-old, the child has to develop a relationship with me. And it can happen in an instant, and it can happen over the course of several months. And I need to be patient and allow it to evolve. And the same process really happens with the teens. The teens tend to be either pretty much shut down verbally or lots of talk. The children tend to engage more in thematic play and kind of the testing of relationships in an interactive manner, which is different. And, I remember one of my mentors back in graduate school talked about the therapeutic process as the law of supply and demand, where the supply of valid interpretations far exceeds its legitimate demand. So it really doesn't matter what I think I see. I need to be patient and wait to what the child or teenager wants to work with and help process.
Do you think parents are generally aware of the kinds of conflict that they express in front of their kids? Or is that something that they need to be taught?
I can only speak from the skewed populations that I see. And I think because they come to me, they're having a difficult time doing that. And I have to be as empathic yet firm as possible with them to be able to say, look, I understand. This is incredibly difficult, but when you do this, this is the impact on your child, and is this the legacy that you want?
Are there times when children will let you know in their own way that this kind of conflict is really upsetting them, and what is upsetting them most is their parents' inability or refusal to accept the fact that they are contributors to said conflict?
I've been described as being very child-friendly. I'm one of those people who gets down on the floor with the child, and I can be as silly as giggling. So the children really seem to enjoy talking to me and letting me know what they feel, sometimes to the chagrin of their parents, because it's not uncommon that the parents will try to coach the children into what to say, how to say it, and when to say it. And then as the children and I are just having a great time together, suddenly the truth, as opposed to what they've been told to say, comes out. And that tends to be an uncomfortable situation for the parents, obviously.
Yes. I've always been fond of the time when you ask a child, is there something that you need to tell me today? And they reveal the thing that mom or dad told them to tell you right before the session, sometimes in the waiting room or walking up the steps to the office. And it's wonderful, isn't it, that how honest and direct a young child will be, and how some teenagers are. Could we turn our attention a bit to the issue of finding a therapist? How do you find a therapist? If you're a parent and you don't know anybody, how do you find somebody good?
Go to their pediatrician, go to the school psychologist or school counseling office, go to the religious leaders in the community and ask them who they like working with. And then word of mouth from friends. A lot of times when people get divorced, they end up, particularly with domestic violence, there are all these shelters and support groups. They have a list of therapists who they keep very close to their chest to use them for specific circumstances. So those are great sources of referrals as well.
Could you talk just a bit about kind of special issues that tend to come up a kid who's severely ADHD, very obsessive, a child who may be on the spectrum, and how you help parents adjust their expectations there and help them settle into a parenting plan that fits the kid's needs, not the parents' rights.
Those are the most difficult and complex cases. Many times the stress from caring for a child who requires a lot more care than the quote-unquote the neurotypical child sends a lot of families into a divorce spin. And what is common is that there is usually in one parent a resistance towards perceiving a child as having problems in many areas. And even if they do, both parents not uncommonly engage in a blame game. Well, the child's this way because you did this or you did that. The children themselves, because they're neuroatypical, do not necessarily react and respond to the kinds of stressors in the way that many people anticipate. For example, there may be instances where you'll see a child with ADHD who, because they're great at focusing on preferred activities and not looking to engage and stay attentive toward non-preferred activities, the non-preferred activity are the conflicting parents, and they just tune those parents right out. Many times, a lot of the neuroatypical children really need a lot of external boundaries, and parents have a very, very hard time understanding that the children's issues with transition and change doesn't have to do with one parent being a better parent than the other, but the children really need those boundaries in order to function best, and when they're not there, they can get quite upset, and the parents become quickly overwhelmed by watching a child getting out of control emotionally, physically, verbally, and the anxiety that each one brings to the pot just raises the heat. And many times the parents need to be taught how to help the children regain some degree of composure in a safe way.
That sounds like a very difficult thing to do, does it not?
When somebody comes into our office for help, creating an environment for change, we need to be able to show them there is a degree of empathy and a caring that helps them develop the courage to explore the most difficult experiences. And in order to do so, they need to feel that our office is a very safe space. And many times letting them know what your boundaries are in regards to violence, in regards to, to inform somebody or to break confidentiality to help protect people. It's important to let them know that you are there to help create that safe space for them so that everybody feels comfortable working toward this positive end.
Dr. Abrams, I want to thank you for your compassion and your care and the information that you provided. This was very helpful. Thanks for joining us. It'd be really cool if you could spread the word. You know someone who could use this? Well, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, but also share more with somebody about our mission to help co-parents feel less alone. Please share this podcast freely. That's my shameless plug. For more tips and tools about how to navigate this time, please go to makesenseofthemess.com.